Hello friends, and welcome to Talking with Famous People, the internet YouTube channel that's constantly existing. My name, as I said, I don't really remember if I've already said it or not. Now you're looking at me, but you're not seeing anything because it's dark. This is what I like to call, back in the day when I made these kind of videos, our car video or video. I am making it, therefore, primarily to think or talk things out as I'm driving. As I've persisted in this YouTube channel over the last 10 years or so, I've become more picky about when I make a video and what I make it about. My old habits of just talking, stream of consciousness, kind of reflecting on stuff and calling that content, those days have passed somewhat. And in this car musing video, specifically, I'm going to explore somewhat that question. Why, how, and when did I become the person I am now in the ways that are distinct from what I did with the YouTube channel historically? This may not be an interesting topic for really anybody, but certainly not if you're not already familiar with the channel. It's probably not going to be especially interesting, but it may have a few insights and or observations that do universalize. So if you're still here, might as well stick it out a little longer. When I first started this channel, it was very much just a place for me to dump endless hours of recorded thoughts on a variety of topics. When I first started, there were only long form videos. There was no live streaming, no shorts. And when I first started, everybody was automatically monetized. You didn't have to qualify or anything. When I first started, I wasn't really evaluating YouTube as something I could even conceivably be successful at. I just figured it's a place where I can archive my musings, thoughts, explanations, ideas, whatever, and be able to revisit them sometime in the future. At some point while doing this, one of my videos, which was about typology, actually became rather popular compared to the other ones anyway, and I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I can get people to watch me on YouTube based on the quality of my talking about a subject that people are interested in. And for some stretch of time, I really made a push to be successful at YouTube, which is to say, to blow up as a channel, make money at it, or whatever. But I also battled continually throughout those early days with sustaining a clear understanding of what I wanted out of the channel. If you really want to be successful at YouTube, you need to have a distinct vision and persist in it for the purposes of being successful at YouTube, not for anything else. What I was doing was mostly just delighting in having anybody willing to listen to what I was saying, watch my videos or whatever. I felt this relief from a long-standing deficit of being paid attention to. I no longer have that kind of quality because I've said so much on so many videos that have been seen by some, many, not a lot, but overall a total of a lot of different people over the 10 years, and a lot of different views. So I feel heard in some sense in a way that I never did before I was YouTubing. And having accomplished that feeling of being heard, I am not as relentless a producer of content as I once was. You might think that's an odd thing to say if you're familiar with the channel, because I've been doing a lot of live streaming for a lot of hours, and in fact, if you're going to measure it that way, it's conceivable that I'm making more content than ever. But the difference between now and in the past is, in the past, I was actually making something. I was making content. On the way down to the casino, where I lost, of course, but I don't take out more money than once I lose the money I take out initially. So it's not a huge big deal, but it's still annoying. Regardless, as I was driving out of the casino, I was listening to Host Eric's Greatest Hits, which are some songs that I've made over the years and recorded, uploaded, and put on this playlist. And I was pleasantly surprised by what I was listening to, by and large. I thought, oh yeah, I know that my recorded music may not be exactly what I would like it to be. In other words, it's not as well produced, as perfect, or as good as I want it to be. But it's still, in listening to it for the first time, some of the songs for the first time in a while, because I had it on shuffle, I was struck by the fact that, wow, I put a lot of time, attention, effort into at least attempting to polish up these musical creations, and I'm by and large pleased with the product. What's going on with the fact that I don't seem to make anything anymore? Not really. I live stream, I issue commentary on things like in this video. Sometimes I argue with people or get annoyed, but I don't really make stuff anymore. I'm not making writing, which I certainly have done plenty of that in my life as well. I'm not making music in the sense that I'm not recording new music. And part of that, I suppose, just links to the fact that I kind of got out of those habits during the dramatic life transition of my parents' death, selling the house in LA, moving up here, etc. But I think part of it, additionally, is that I feel as though I've gotten everything I can possibly get out of exercising. Like, exercising my capacity to be creative and generate some kind of work product that validates for me against one of my criteria adequately for me to listen to it regularly across the years, occasionally, that I'm not sure if that has any value anymore. Whereas there once was a time when I believed without any question, without any hesitation, that attaining results consistent with my standards in terms of like making art or music or whatever, that was always and necessarily very important. That ultimately it was the most important thing I could do. So I don't seem to believe that anymore, or I'm not sure. But the weird thing is, the switch to vertical live streaming dramatically changed the numbers around the channel. I got a lot of new subs in the last 6 months. Like as much as in the last 6 months I got in the 10 years prior. And that provided me some burst of enthusiasm about YouTubing, right? That it certainly linked to me putting in even more hours streaming than I otherwise would, because I was seeing actual new kind of results after a long period of stagnation. Having said all of that, I definitely feel kind of creatively adrift. And I guess ontologically adrift in terms of what it is I do. I no longer think of myself as somebody who's any kind of evangelist for personality theory, simply because I don't see the world as being ready to embrace personality theory as it should, but instead insistent on embracing it as it should not, in ways that just cause me to have to like start back at remedial 101 and say, okay, well, I can't really explain any of this to you until I explain how and why all the existing information you have and believe about it is wrong, or at least not correct in its mechanics, even if it's correct in its specifics, you know? So it's just, I understand very clearly why that's not a valuable endeavor for me. The reason being that it's without the rigor of like empirical studies and stuff, it'll always be mired in people's intuitive, holistic understanding of what cognitive functions are. And those same people who are interested are also not interested in having its utility as a toy sacrificed in favor of its utility as an explanation. So I've become very disenchanted with the idea of carrying a cognitive function torch, simply because it's too much work. There's too little existing understanding to inform people off of. I only have to do the kind of thing where you fix how the other party understands it wrong, and then hopefully it gets back to zero and you can start from scratch. That's a nightmare, right? So I don't view myself like that. I don't really think of myself as having any possible future with my musical endeavors, because who does? I mean, who does? 0.0000001% of people who would like to make music and sell it or be a professional musician or whatever are able to do so, and even they, I'm sure, have to hustle and work hard to actually bring in any money at it. Now, again, I'm not necessarily evaluating everything in terms of all success is measured by money now that I'm jaded or whatever. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that my understanding of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and what comprises success has evolved a lot over the course of the years that I've been doing YouTube, and continues to elude me, really, in terms of exactly what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Right now, I know I'm explaining my thoughts about myself changing Eric over time and YouTube because of two reasons. One, I want to talk it out, and the only way I can meaningfully talk it out is to talk it out loud with a camera rolling, because that compels me to be more focused in my explication and more attentive to things like pacing and audio experience, which actually ultimately makes it better for me in terms of understanding what I'm thinking about. But number two, I'm killing time, making the drive more agreeable by having my attention mostly on what I'm talking about, and only secondarily and incidentally on what I'm doing, namely driving. So, what's the takeaway here? Let's nutshell the question that's emerging, a question that's emerging from the soup of this ideational fog that's coalescing into this video, right? The question that's emerging is, what should I care about in terms of doing? prioritize an understanding of self that finds purpose in more quiet ways, more subjective ways, more attention to SI, and more getting outside, getting exercise, stuff like that, enjoying watching a little television here and there, and try to excise this productivity fetish that I also exemplify, as do most people in the world, or at least in America. In other words, is that paradigm bad, and would I be more well served to try to transcend this productivity fetish, or would I be more well served to understand myself, continuing to understand myself, and more understanding myself as somebody who's destined by his specific talents and weaknesses to do something specific, and I better get off my ass and start doing it because it's important for me to get it done. To have that kind of framework requires you to have some kind of magical thinking framework. Obviously, you can't be purposed or destined to do something without a purposer or a destiner. That implies some kind of magical thinking. Historically, I've been into that idea. Like, I must end up with some kind of narrative positioning about myself, from, like, pretend, Eric, that instead of being you, you were your own project manager for life, who had inside information regarding your personnel file and a genuine good intention to see you thrive, living your best life, or whatever. What would that be? And why would that be it? The answer is, I don't know. Like, I had a lot of fun last night when I took mushrooms, fresh into a bottle of Adderall. I'm still rather gacked out in the sense that I got plenty to say and thinking about stuff and energy enough to do a few things. But it used to be that I'd get gacked out for the purpose of making something. Like, I'd spend hours multi-tracking this song, trying to get it all perfect, and then finally I'd be like, done, publish it. And I'd feel some sort of satisfaction, depending on how it came out, you know. It seemed as though I could justify better my enthusiasm for amphetamines when I was not just doing maintenance stuff that I'll have to do again tomorrow, like clean the kitchen or whatever, but rather creating objects that, once done, leave a permanent mark of your existence on the world, even if only a digital one. From talking myself through this here, I can tell I would like to be the latter, not the former, more. And I also want to be kind of easy on myself. I tend to beat myself up a whole bunch. Like, I say I hate myself all the time. I'm always saying things like, Eric, you're horrible, you terrible, fucking horrible. Even though there's no reason for me to be saying that to myself, because it's not like I've done something in the status quo recently that caused me to say that. It's just some memory from a long time ago, or understanding of myself having socially failed in a moment, or having made a bad decision at some point, or whatever. And the thing is, words are so powerful. Whether you're saying them to yourself because you're habituated to punishing yourself with harsh and cutting words instead of actually dealing with whatever's going on in a more healthy way, like recognizing maybe that you were young and dumb and ought to forgive yourself a bit or something. Maybe taking an alternate approach that says, I was bad and I deserve to condemn myself, but I've condemned myself enough now, so even if I don't forgive myself, there's, at this point, it's just beating a dead horse. I could take that approach, but it's hard to break habits of, I guess they're habits of actualizing, right? At some point, I tried to improve myself, become a better person by just really scathingly negating myself when I failed to uphold whatever standard I thought I ought to have upheld. The problem is I consistently and still do fail to differentiate between instances where I really deserve any kind of substantial condemnation and just simple human mistakes that everybody makes, like saying the wrong thing to somebody, like forgetting their name, calling them by the wrong name or something that is unfortunate but is not any instance of wickedness, and I don't deserve accordingly to be condemned very harshly for it. Yet I'm going to always be condemning myself more harshly than anybody else will. Additionally, I've got all these things to say and ideas and opinions about stuff, and then, like last night into today, I was live streaming, and it got a little pushbacky, right? Like I started getting annoyed because I'm trying to explain something that nobody's asked me to explain, and people are saying things that are ancillary to what I'm talking about, but wrong, and I'm just feeling like frustrated that people insist on giving me pushback when they need to be listening and learning or whatever. But obviously people are going to engage with what you're saying, your words, your media, etc., on their own terms, not on yours. And as I was saying in those streams, I have come long since to understand that I'm never going to get anywhere thinking I'm going to try to convince people of things, persuade them, or accomplish anything with my correctness other than just making those sounds, not knowing any possible good impacts, recognizing all the pushback, not really understanding what possible negative impacts there might be beyond the pushback, and generally coming across as condescending, arrogant, full of yourself, thinks he's right about everything, coming across like a pedantic hate bucket, like exactly the kind of person you should just put all of your hate into that bucket because he's such a douchebag. Why was I like that, being like that? I mean, just, I don't know, man. I don't know. It was a combination of being like, woohoo, I'm cutting loose last night with the Adderall and the mushrooms hitting hard, and I was just like, yeah, baby. But then you don't balance your biological flows very well. Then you get cranky from being up too long and or sitting in the same spot for too long, etc. You start finding the back and forth instead of it feeling like an opportunity for you to get through to the other person either what you're trying to say or that they should listen to you or whatever. I need to be moderate in my wallows. Nobody's well served for me to live stream for 8 hours, even though I do it all the time, because by the end of it I used to feel all strung out and ideally when I stream I'd have a little hunger for it, some ideas thought up to talk about, so that's my musing video, my car musing video. I'm feeling both good, happy, settled, healthy, whatever, and bad, like adrift, why am I going to the casino tonight? Like, don't entertain yourself like that. Make something. Do something that leaves you with something after the fact. And yet, I seem to be affording myself a lot of leeway in terms of getting back from break late, you know. He's been on break for several years now. We're not quite sure when he's returning from his break. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in. If you're here at the end of this video, you really enjoyed listening to this musing video more than I expected. I expected you to just think, oh, wow, that's boring, and turn it off right away. So if you're still here, you are an impressive and important person who deserves all the praises and fabulous prizes from here all the way to the end.